kick off today's video with a fun little story because the other stories that this video covers are anything but fun. So, fun story. Do you want to know why I left the Escapist in 2014? It's because they wouldn't publish a review of mine. A review for Assassin's Creed Unity. Now, I hinted very strongly and, blew a few whistles to sort of, clue people into what was going on because legally, I couldn't explicitly tell you that Defy Media, the parent company of the Escapist, didn't want to publish the review because they had sponsorship opportunities with Ubisoft that they didn't want to tarnish, that they didn't want to risk. And they didn't want me to talk about microtransactions or monetization in these reviews because they felt that the two things should be separate. My opinion of the game should be separate from my opinion of the business. And if there's one thing that Jimquisition has gone out of its way to demonstrate in the years since then, it's that there is no separation. Nothing happens in a bubble, everything exists as part of the same establishment, the same system. Now, I couldn't go into detail at the time because Defy Media legally had me over a barrel, and we were in a bit of a dicey predicament with them, but Defy Media is dead. Dead and buried. And I've been under no obligation to keep its dirty little secret, and I've been waiting for an opportunity to bring them up. And today is as good an opportunity as any. That story pales in comparison to what we're about to discuss, because Ubisoft is rotten to the fucking core. Ubisoft faces multiple serious, strong and credible accusations of systemic abuse at every level of its company. From uncomfortable atmospheres to threats and insults to physical assault and rape, the stories finally being acknowledged about Ubisoft are as heartbreaking and terrifying as they are grotesque and numerous. And all the more angering when coupled with the fact, and I'm calling it a fact, that Ubisoft harboured, protected, and when it needed to, moved abusers around the company like the Catholic Church. And you can quote me on that. Among those accused are Maxime Bellend, VP of Editorial, who has been accused of multiple counts of physical abuse and sexual harassment, including one instance where he actually choked a woman in a fit of drunken rage. Tommy Francois, VP of Editorial and Creative Services, is known for pressuring women in front of his staff to have sex with him, as well as frequently attempting to kiss and touch them without permission. The Ubisoft Toronto brand manager known as Escapist denies forcing himself on an executive from a marketing company, but the allegation has been backed up by other stories of inappropriate behaviour from Twitch streamers who'd had encounters with him. When I say these allegations are company-wide, I mean they are worldwide too. Ubisoft Sofia in Bulgaria has been lambasted for a work culture steeped in racism and homophobia. In the US, well, like I've said in a previous work, Ubisoft hurt my friends. Directly. Not just the people who physically assaulted them, but the company who ignored their stories for years. Years. Willfully and recklessly. The stories I've just touched on are drops in the bucket. In fact, I can confirm to you right now, more's going to come out, and it's going to continue to be fucking ugly. One consistent thread running through the stories is that Ubisoft's entire corporate culture is built to protect powerful men who use that power to exploit, terrorize, and rape people. Like many people, I knew there was shady shit at Ubisoft. I knew friends had been hurt by individuals there. Friends of mine whose stories were theirs to tell and whose stories are starting to come out. People who for years were just trying to be heard, just trying to be seen, just trying to have their fucking stories listened to. But even so, the sheer depth of the abuse at Ubisoft, how it's baked so inextricably into the company's culture, like the words in a stick of rock, that's something not even I have been prepared for. The whirlwind of accusations culminated this week in the resignations of Sergei Hassoet, Chief Creation Officer, Cecile Cornett, and Global Head of HR and CEO of Canadian Studios Yanis Mallet, who have all stepped down from their roles. Sergei is credited as Ubisoft's most powerful creative force, which would be an hilarious misnomer if anything about this man was funny. He drugs people without their consent, in addition to just being a misogynistic, racist, homophobic piece of fucking shit. Cornett's resignation is interesting, as while she's faced no allegations, her role as head of human resources must undoubtedly come under heavy scrutiny. HR is said to have played a huge role in the burial of allegations and protection of senior staff. In fact, HR has been so openly unprofessional that half the team demanded a full exoneration in all of this, or threatened to walk, because protecting their own arses was more important than investigating multiple doesn't do it, many stories of abuse occurring under their carefully lackadaisical watch. In any case, the three major resignations were seen by many as a sign that Ubisoft was, after decades of willful ignorance, finally taking things seriously. The aforementioned Sergey, the guy who drugs people, was a notable sacrifice to the altar of appeasement, given that he was considered untouchable within the company for years and too buddy-buddy with CEO Yves Guillemot, comfortably in a position of shielded authority and corporate favour. It's worth noting, however, that while Ubisoft has finally kickstarted its own allegedly external investigation, only when the stories of abuse finally became too loud to deny anymore, the people actually facing the strongest accusations have all so far been allowed to step down, to resign with all the dignity and benefits such an act offers. Sergey, a man who is quoted as saying of a fellow worker that someone should open her mind by fucking her from behind and share her around until she gets it, hasn't been fired, reprimanded, or openly punished. He was allowed to walk, to spend years hurting people and then slink off like a fucking Malfoy. Even when repercussions are on the menu, Ubisoft continues to protect its executive chums as much as it can. And that's one of the most truly vile things about Ubisoft, how even right now, self-preservation is the only thing on its mind. CEO Yves Guillemot, who has been in charge of Ubisoft for over 30 years now, offered his puppy dog apology for the decades of pain and fear that flagrantly prospered under his watch, and we're meant to believe him when he acts as if this is the first he's heard about any of it, about abuse so deeply burned into the company that the HR department's primary job seems to be covering for it. Either Yves Guillemot, whose family is Ubisoft, knew about the years of intimidation and assault and did nothing, in which case he's a scumbag and a liar, or he truly did only hear about all the drugging and hate speech and rape a few weeks ago, in which case he's a neglectful idiot whose ignorance is on a whole other level of irresponsible. In any case, he'd lose his job in a just world, but he won't. He won't lose his job for the same reason he should lose it. He is Ubisoft. In the time since the allegations first surfaced, or should I say resurfaced and finally listened to this time, Ubisoft has gone out of its way to bury them in the media and drown out the negative stories with a mountain of hype. At the same time the abuse stories were coming out, content for upcoming Ubisoft games started getting leaked and dutifully covered by a games media that was hungrily lapping up the distraction. This was all ahead of a scheduled online showcase, Ubisoft Forward, which Ubisoft had the unmitigated gall to not cancel. Frankly, I don't think a company under investigation for a fully fledged rape culture should have any business promoting its products as if nothing's going on, but that's Ubisoft for ya. Ubisoft allowed its top sleazebags to resign just a day shy of its Ubi Forward event, seemingly as a way to try and put a bookend on the whole situation before moving on with clean hands. And if you watched the Ubisoft event or read coverage about it on most press websites, you'd think those hands only sweated liquid soap. So clean. So pure. In a move that could only be called pragmatically villainous, Ubisoft announced ahead of the event, without using the Ubiforward hashtag it had been using all week, that the livestream would not make mention of the ongoing investigation. They weren't even going to do a half-baked non-apology like J. Allen Brack did at BlizzCon that time. Their reasoning was pathetic and clearly disingenuous, saying that because the stream was pre-recorded, they couldn't add anything, like an acknowledgement of wrongdoing to it. As if editing video is as new to Ubisoft as accusations of sexual assault are to its CEO. Ubisoft betrayed its own real motives with that lack of hashtag. Ubisoft is doing what video game publishers always do when they face a serious allegation. They're making damn sure nobody crosses the streams and contaminates what Ubisoft wants to sell with stories about what Ubisoft did. They want to keep the allegations and the video game products separate. Keep them clean, keep them pure, make sure that anybody who hasn't heard the allegations won't hear them, and that those who have are drowned out by gameplay trailers and hands-on previews and news stories. And it sickens me to admit it, but damn, Ubisoft's good at what it does in this department. With the exception of a handful of press publications, most notably Polygon and Kotaku, and even they were spotty, the majority of game journos and influencers and publications were happy to keep their stories about abuse distinct and discreet from their excited previews and interviews and coverage of Ubisoft's little event, which got so much more coverage. You can look up Escape or Assassin's Creed Valhalla or Watch Dogs Legion and have a very good shot at never seeing anything about the disgusting behaviour of the publisher behind them, just like Ubisoft intended. It's the same mantra the company has had about these allegations for decades. Nothing to see here. I won't spend too much time dumping on specific sites. I don't want to draw attacks and harassment toward any one pundit, any one publication. But I've seen far too many maintain this duality of story and serve as an unwitting accomplice to Ubisoft's marketing game plan. I am disappointed. The media should hold the industry to account. It's the only entity that is even in a position to try, most of the time. But I keep waiting for it to step up, and it doesn't. I keep waiting for pundits to stop going to bat for multi-billion-dollar corporations who would happily burn their families for a 0.1% share increase, but they don't. I keep waiting for game reviews to normalise mentioning things like crunch and abuse at the companies they're happily awarding glowing 10 out of 10 review scores to. But they don't. And here was a real shot at stepping up to the plate, growing up, and being more than an extension of a publisher's marketing department. At sending the message that no, it's not acceptable to cover for abusers over a period of decades and then continue promoting games like nothing happened. But the vast majority of the media, be they journalist, influencer, or pundit, simply promoted the games alongside Ubisoft. And I'm not mad. Not at the media. Like I said, I'm just disappointed. I do remain mad at Ubisoft. I remain mad at the entire rotten, fucked up, corrupt and malicious so-called AAA game industry. Make no mistake, the company responsible for your fun little Viking game or your apolitical Brexit simulator hosted evil. It hosted, rewarded, paid thousands and millions of dollars out to evil people. People who are known to be evil. People who are allowed to simply walk away when that evil became too hard to hide. And when I go onto Ubisoft's social media profiles and I see armies of fans either soaking in the plastic artificial hype without a care in the world, or actively shouting down anyone who mentions the investigation because they just want to enjoy the product, they just want to enjoy buying and consuming and don't want to feel bad about it or acknowledge that bad people were involved in the products they want to buy and be excited for, the toys they want to play with, I feel quite genuinely ill. It's been said by some that they're focusing only on Ubisoft's games is actually a good thing. Spinning it as some form of twisted altruism, they argue that many good people worked on the games as well, and they deserve their time to shine with events like Uber Forward, and the resulting coverage that only talks about corporate products and not corporate behaviour. It would be cruel, the assertion suggests, to bring up Ubisoft's behaviour alongside video game coverage, because it would stain the hard work of the good people at Ubisoft. Crueler still is to not acknowledge that the good people at Ubisoft were the victims of the bad people at Ubisoft, and then, when their stories were ignored and buried and they continued to be harassed and harmed, they became victims of Ubisoft itself. A company that shouldn't be allowed to move on, that should never be allowed to fucking move on. Right now, when Ubisoft is at its most sensitive to this truth, is the time to fucking strike it. Yes, it absolutely sucks for good, hard-working developers to have their upcoming game presented under a cloud of nauseating violations of trust. But what sucks more is Ubisoft being allowed to forget those violations and continue consequence-free. What sucks more is Ubisoft thinking it can let its worst offenders go gently into that good fucking night and move on to hyping a shitty battle royale game without skipping a beat. What sucks more is the fact that Ubisoft spent years coddling rapists. And here's where I stopped writing a script. Because I don't think structured words, pre-structured words, do an adequate enough job of demonstrating just how fucking tired I am. For years, I've been trying to advance conversations. For years, I've been trying to point at the abuses in the game industry. For years, I have been screaming into a void and bashing my head against a brick wall. And for years, the so-called AAA video game industry has only gotten worse. Worse and worse and worse and worse, while people cover and defend and go to bat for it, while it continues to prey upon audiences while it continues to abuse, bully and stress out and burn out and inflict PTSD upon workers within the industry and pretty much anyone else who has the misfortune of coming into contact with it. There are good journalists out there doing really good work. I've praised Jason Schreier before many times on this show. I think work coming out of Kotaku and Polygon at times is incredibly valuable. But the media is infested with far too many corporate thralls, some of whom do not see their future in games media, but in games PR. You see a lot of promotions, quote unquote, from that career line to the other. That's not everyone though. Some people do just want to not think about the bad stuff so that they can enjoy their video games without feeling guilty. Some people do genuinely think it's good journalism on their part to compartmentalize the game industry, to keep the stories of its abuse and the stories of its products entirely separate. But that's only helped them. Games media in the long run only ever really serves to help the industry. Difficult questions are ignored. In fact, interviews are tightly controlled by PR reps who vet questions and make sure that developers aren't challenged in any meaningful way. I don't want to make this all about the media, but these past few weeks have just, it's the last straw. It's the final and most demoralizing example of how the game industry will never change because it will never feel pressure to change. The game industry has the products, and the media needs those products to talk about for content. Publishers know this. They know they have total control, and they'll blacklist and forget about and consign to the oubliette anyone who actually does try and hold them responsible, anyone who actually does try and take them to task. And you know what? After years of this industry blacklisting me, dropping me like a lead balloon the moment I went independent, I couldn't have been more happier with their decision to tell me I'm not welcome. I don't want to be welcome in that den of abusers. The so-called AAA video game industry loves to hold access over journalists' heads. Access. If you criticize us, if you question us, if you make us feel bad, then we won't let you come to our events. We won't let you come to our preview shows. We won't let you preview Hyperscape or Assassin's Creed Valhalla, as if that fucking really matters in the long run. But being blacklisted by this industry should be seen as a badge of honor. Oh, Ubisoft doesn't want to work with me. Oh, the rape company doesn't want to fucking work with me. Boo fucking who? Just stop and think about who's inviting you to preview events. Just stop and think about who you're trying to please. Just stop and think. That's all I want to see more of in the gaming community. That's all I want to see more of in the discourse. People stopping and fucking thinking. Just apply broader thought to the game industry and stop trying to view each individual game through a pinprick tunnel devoid of context or the wider, crucial behaviour of the companies producing them. It's ironic that an industry so obsessed with engagement doesn't want people to actually engage. It wants consumption, but it doesn't want autonomous thought. Heaven for fucking fend. You know, people have sent me emails these past few weeks asking if I'm okay, if mentally I'm in a good place. I know, especially recently, I've talked about mental health diagnoses that I've had, bipolar type 2, complex PTSD, maybe even ADD, which would explain a lot. But actually, I'm okay. Yes, it's quite clear that these past few weeks especially I've been more pissed off than usual and that we have explored some incredibly dark topics during a year that overall has been fucking awful. But as far as it's possible for me to be under all of these circumstances, I'm okay. Don't get me wrong, my sense of disillusionment with the game industry is at an all-time high. I don't think I have ever, across my life, across my career, had such a low opinion. And you all know me, if you've watched this show regularly, you know that my opinion of the AAA video game industry has never been particularly high. But even by my standards, my opinion of them, my view of them, is in the fucking gutter. In fact, the few games I was looking forward to this year have turned out to be major fucking disappointments, and nothing the game industry does lately brings me much joy. However, in the past few weeks, I've only found that incredibly freeing, because I truly don't give a fuck anymore. I don't give a fuck about the bridges I've burned. I don't give a fuck about the mobs that I invite upon me to harass me anymore. I don't give a fuck about any of it. Because this industry is shit and it won't change, and many people would take that as an opportunity to throw in the towel. But frankly, I think not giving a fuck about the game industry anymore actually makes me better at my job. These past few weeks, my videos have been on fucking fire, and it's because I just don't care about pulling punches. Oh yeah, I've been pulling a few punches up until the past few weeks. I'm at the end of my tether with it. I'm out of patience. I have lost every last single fuck I could give. But ultimately, this isn't about me. It's not even really about Ubisoft, it's about the people Ubisoft hurt. The women, the marginalised people, the people who have been bullied by executives, powerful men at Ubisoft, who even to this day are escaping, eluding punishment, and being looked after. Without these people coming forward, some of whom had to do so under condition of anonymity just because of the sheer fear that the AAA game industry likes to instill in people, without those who have come forward, we wouldn't be able to hear about these stories. So once again, as I have done in previous videos, I have to thank everyone who has bravely come forward, reached out to anyone who had actually listened to them, or took to social media and braved an inevitable wave of harassment and doubt and people calling them liars. People put themselves on the line to shed light on dark, dark, dark shit happening not just at Ubisoft, not just at in the game industry at large, but in fighting game communities, in communities like the Smash Brothers competitive community, in Twitch, in the comics industry, in the wrestling industry. People are coming forward and sharing their stories, and we need them to, and thank you. If you are someone who has come forward, and if you're someone who hasn't, and you have been hurt, it's okay to be afraid, but if you do come out, share your story, then I know that myself and many others will be grateful for that, so thank you. And Ubisoft, I'm not finished with you yet. It's a bit of a big old busy year for Ubisoft, isn't it? Got a new Assassin's Creed coming out, got Watch Dogs Legion, got a Battle Royale game in Hyperscape, and a whole new console generation. That's plenty of opportunity for me to cover their games. And subsequently, plenty of opportunity for me to remind you over and over again what Ubisoft did. Over and over again. Like I said, Ubisoft, we ain't finished. And you ain't finished until you're finished.
People are going to be upset you didn't say thank God for me.
I know.
Don't go where.
That's, that is what it is.
I was born depressed and I end up in one big mess and trip around it.